I'm Summer DePro, and I am pleased and humbled to welcome everyone to the University of Arkansas-Pulaski Technical College. We have lots of guests in the room, as well as students, faculty, and staff. This is the first big public event at the college since I began serving as chancellor, and I'm thrilled to learn what our distinguished panelists can teach us on the topic of inequity in mental health. It's a great way to start my 3 weeks into being chancellor. I will introduce our panelists shortly, but I will begin by thanking UA-PTC faculty and staff that are in attendance, and most importantly, the students who have joined us this morning. Welcome. We're really glad that you're here. Whether this is your first visit to UA-Pulaski Tech, or you're a stalwart member of the PTC community, I'm so glad to see you here. I also want to thank the UA-PTC Cultural Diversity and Community Involvement Committee and the Little Rock Central High National Historic Site for sponsoring and producing this event and discussion today. This event ushers in Black History Month, which is observed throughout February. More importantly, though, exploring this topic provides insight and perspectives into the current times from the lived experiences of people whose voices call us to heightened empathy and compassion. As we all know, the world can be a rather harsh place. It is my hope that, as this college prepares its graduates for careers and further education, we can instill in them the emotional intelligence and concern for our neighbors that make the world a better place to live. With that, it is my distinct privilege to introduce today's panelists. Our moderator today is UA-PTC Assistant Teaching Professor of Computer Science, Mayo Johnson. He is a native of Little Rock and a 22-year faculty member here at Pulaski Tech teaching cybersecurity and other information technology curricula. He graduated from Hall High School, has a bachelor's degree in computer information systems from the University of Central Arkansas, and a master's degree in computer information management from Webster University. He worked at Axiom Corporation as a systems analyst and worked as a technology consultant in London, England, where he also studied international information management at Regent's University. He is an active member of the UA-PTC Cultural Diversity and Community Involvement Committee, a former chair of the Little Rock Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission, and he has moderated a series of community forums on race and culture during the 50th anniversary of desegregation of the Little Rock Central High School in 2007. He also collaborated with the author, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, as moderator for the UA-PTC Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. virtual event in 2021, themed Equity and Social Justice in the Pandemic. Our first panelist is Mary Kate Terrell. She is an assistant teaching professor of sociology and anthropology at UA-Pulaski Tech. She teaches anthropology, sociology, geography, and gender studies. Ms. Terrell focuses on sociocultural and anthropogeographical, man, that's a lot of syllables. Okay, with a concentration on the intersectionality of gender, religion, and social status in the South. Her degrees include an MLA from Henderson State, an MA from Arkansas State University, and her 16 years at the college includes time as the Director of Records. She holds certificates in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and personal wellness foundations from the University of South Florida, Muma College of Business. Our second panelist is Dr. Patricia L. Griffin of Little Rock. She is a practicing clinical psychologist and has held positions as Director of Psychological Services for Adolescent Inpatient Treatment for Arkansas Mental Health Services Division. She's the Director of the South Pulaski Services for Central Arkansas Mental Health Services and Psychological Consultant for Restore Drug, Chemical Dependency, and Eating Disorder Program at Riverview Hospital and St. Vincent Medical Infirmary. She is a past president of the Arkansas Psychological Association, former chair of the Arkansas Psychological Association's Diversity Committee, past president and founding member of Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals, and a member of the Association of Black Psychologists. Dr. Griffin has been involved in social advocacy work in the field of mental health at the state and federal levels. Her areas include race relations, multicultural psychology, cultural diversity, cultural competency, trauma in the African American community, and women's issues. And last but absolutely not least is Miss Elizabeth Eckford. She is an internationally recognized civil rights leader whose experience as one of the Little Rock Nine in 1957 placed her at the center of the national crisis. At only 15 years old, she was among the first 9 black students ever to attend classes at a previously all-white Little Rock Central High School. Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus, in defiance of the federal court order, called out the Arkansas National Guard to prevent Miss Eckford and the other children from integrating Central High. President Eisenhower then issued an executive order which federalized the Arkansas National Guard and ordered them to support the integration and protect the students on September 23, 1957. Among her many awards are the prestigious Spingarn Medal by the NAACP in 1958. In 1999, President Bill Clinton presented Ms. Eckford the nation's highest civil award, the Congressional Gold Medal, to Ms. Eckford and all members of the Little Rock Nine. In 2018, Eckford co-authored a book for young readers, The Worst First Day, Bullied While Desegregating Central High. Also in 2018, Elizabeth Eckford commemorative bench was dedicated at Central High. Ms. Eckford, we are profoundly grateful to you for sharing your wisdom with us today. And Mayo, the stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. DePro. Thank you, everyone, for coming out to our MLK Inequity in Health, Mental Health Forum. I want to just again say thanks to Ms. Eckford. We've been thanking her all day. We gave her flowers literally and figuratively, and we want to just always let her know how much we appreciate her courage and contributions to society, her and the Little Rock Nine. So again, thank you, Ms. Eckford, for being here. Let's begin, panel. Okay. First question. What are your thoughts on mental health inequity? Do you think it's been compounded by the pandemic? Start with you, Ms. Eckford.
Okay. Of course, there is inequity because some insurance plans do not cover mental health issues to the extent that they do with physical ailments. And some school systems do not have counselors who are prepared to guide people toward resources that are needed. Several months ago, the public Greater Little Rock Mental Health Center was closed due to lack of funding. And even though the state has a surplus of funds, there's been no attention paid to the needs of communities in metropolitan and rural areas for mental health services.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And first of all, I would like to commend UA-Pulaski Tech for convening this forum on mental health. It's very important for us to have discussions such as these in an open forum. The topic of mental health is a social justice issue, and in the context of this celebration, not only on the eve of Black History, but also in following the philosophy of Dr. King, Dr. King was concerned about mental health issues, and I just want to share with you a quotation before I respond to the question. And this, I don't know the date, but this is a quotation of Dr. King that addresses health concerns. Of all the forms of inequity, injustice in health care is the most shocking and inhumane. And we see evidence of this today due to health disparities in this country. And this is based upon inequities economically. It's very difficult to address mental health wellness when you're concerned about your next meal, where you're going to live, the safety of your children, the safety of your communities. All of these are issues that compound inequities in our system and issues that lead to the disparities that we see so prevalent in our communities. As Ms. Eckford has said, many people do not have access to insurance. Many individuals have insurance and don't know how to use it. With the marketplace, this has allowed access to insurance. And I have found that a lot of individuals have insurance and don't know how to use it. So there is an inequity due to how you use your insurance to have access to these benefits. And I could go on and on. I'll share some other issues related to this inequity issue. And of course, the pandemic has compounded it for people of color, especially. And we still see the ripple effect of that today.
Okay, thank you. Professor Terrell.
Thank you. Yes, I think that I'll begin by saying that definitely the pandemic exposed the inequities maybe more openly for us than prior to it, simply because there has been traditionally a top-down approach to providing access to mental health services, whereas, and that top-down approach certainly comes from a sector who has been, for valid historical reasons, mistrusted by many minorities. And so perhaps part of the inequity can be prevented or eased in some way when our mindset about mental health changes from a top-down approach to our human agency level, and we can take some of the inspirations from many of Dr. King's writings and his speeches to know that we have within ourselves the ability to make the change for our human experience as individuals and turn the tables so it's a bottom-up experience that changes our society.
All right, thank you. Regarding mental health, what are some common misconceptions people have, and how can we combat those misconceptions and communicate more effectively? Okay, Ms. Eckford.
Well, one thing that I'm thinking about is that in instances that of people that I have known who have family members who have serious mental disorders, there's almost a conspiracy of silence where they don't acknowledge it, don't address it, and I don't know if there's something cultural about that, but it's almost as if there's shame associated with it.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin.
There are a number of cultural and racial barriers that are still prevalent. Let me just share with you some current statistics. Only 4% of Black psychologists are in the field compared to 86% white psychologists. 4% Black psychologists to 86% white psychologists. 5.3 African American psychiatrists compared to 64.3% white. Historically, the mental health system has not been open, welcoming, and accepting of people of color. As a matter of fact, the mental health system has been an oppressive system. Most of the treatment has taken place through emergency rooms, and this has formulated a foundation for mistrust in the system, because they're not people who look like me or other ethnic groups when you go for mental health treatment. And not only that, it's not just the familiarity of the physical features. Many times they are not culturally competent. They don't understand the culture. And I tell my colleagues, there are not enough of us in Arkansas to provide treatment, and I want to make sure that you understand how to work with our people. And that's why our organization has been so active in the community to interact with our colleagues to make sure that when we make referrals, that these are individuals who are sensitive to working with this population. So there's a basis of mistrust, secrecy. What goes on at home stays at home. But on the other hand, the system has not been welcoming and accepting of people like us.
Thank you. Professor Terrell.
Yes, thank you. I think I will echo off your responses and speak to the stigmatization of just vocalizing that there might be a problem, and also add complication to the stigma by overlapping gender onto this, because I think not only can you see significant inequities based on the racial divisions among us, but just in the upbringing of traditional masculinity and femininity, there are some social truths that are not necessarily factual that we learn about, rubbing dirt in a wound, or crying on daddy's shoulder, as the case may be, that maybe sets up the gender divide within the mental health system also, in seeking treatment and being willing to submit to treatment, with a submission being a stigmatized situation also.
Thank you. Let's follow up on this. How does education and mentoring have a role in mental health equity and defeating these misconceptions?
Well, mentors can open eyes with people who are not aware of how to access systems. Sometimes if someone shows you the way to open a door, you can pass through. But if you don't know the way to that door, you certainly are not going to pass through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Very important question. And I would like to share a personal narrative as to the importance of mentoring, if I may take a moment of personal privilege.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. I'll make this brief. When I graduated from Ouachita Baptist University, I was fifth in my class, magna cum laude, and all of my professors just knew that I had a ticket into graduate school. At graduation, I had not been accepted to a graduate school. I was very naive, thinking that all of the work of the civil rights era had opened graduate programs for people of color. Little did I know that there was an Arkansas psychologist who was working on a mentoring program and challenged graduate programs around the country to open their doors to diversify programs in psychology. And I like to sing his praises today, and that's Dr. Robert L. Williams from Arkansas, graduate of Philander Smith, graduate of Dunbar, scored 82 on an IQ test and was told to go to vocational school, defied all odds, became the first PhD to graduate from Washington University in St. Louis. I give him praises because he opened the door for my generation, based upon a mentorship program. And there are psychologists all over the country. I did not know that the University of Arkansas had signed on to his 10-point program. And we're passing it on through our association. We've established the Robert L. Williams Scholarship Fund. Contact me if you want to make contributions. We awarded our first scholarship this MLK Day. So it's very important, and it's important for students to see individuals who look like them going into the field. Very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so mentorship is probably one of the major pieces that can help us overcome our, even if it's a temporary mental health issue that we're struggling with, those around us in our immediate social networks in the old-fashioned sense of the term can be our go-to people for mentorship. And I'll use a term that Dr. DePro used earlier at brunch, and she wasn't aware that I was going to focus on this, but Dr. King spoke about the importance of creative altruism, and so I wanted to challenge, with this question, I wanted to challenge each of us to be altruistic with those in our immediate surroundings and speak to them first, perhaps if it's the best way to approach it, to just say, if I'm ever blue or you think I'm down, please speak to me about it. And that could open the door for that person too to share their personal struggles because of the stigma. So the door that we need to open certainly can be for literally the therapy center, but just the conversations at home, will change our algorithm from whatever YouTube wants to show us to those at the table with us and build our mentorship there.
Thank you. So we have policies and practices. What policies can be developed for mental health equity? Ms. Eckford.
Well, the thing that I'm thinking about in terms of young people, if you see something, say something. You may not know who can solve the problem, but bring it to the attention of counselors, of teachers, and so that if a friend of yours is very, very depressed and you are afraid that that person is suicidal, say something, seek help, dial 988, the National Mental Health line. Don't just keep it to yourself.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin.
In addition to practices, I think policy is very important. Ms. Eckford mentioned earlier that we have funding for mental health services in this state, but we see that those monies are being channeled in other institutions. Years ago, Arkansas, believe it or not, was one of the leading states in mental health coverage. Every county in the state had a community mental health center, and that hasn't been that long ago. That is not the case now. Mental health centers are shut down. Individuals are dealing with mental health issues that are being dealt with in the criminal industrial complex, and I know we may address that a little bit later, but we need to approach our legislators about refunding mental health in Arkansas and providing these services in communities. People are suffering in communities. When the Little Rock Community Mental Health Center shut down, people didn't even know where to go. They were not told where to make their next appointment. So there has been a breakdown in the mental health system here in Arkansas, and we see evidence of it in our practices.
Thank you. Professor Terrell?
Thank you. Yes, I would say that definitely the breakdown, the deterioration of the resources that are available is a travesty, and within our communities, we have to take collective action to bring that information to the forefront. I wish that I had a brilliant suggestion for a policy that would help this, but none of us can do it alone anyway. We have to simply open those conversations and decide, because one shoe does not necessarily fit all the communities, and the special needs that might be at the forefront in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, and West Memphis might not be the same as in El Dorado. And so, for instance, we need to look at communities, not top down, but the communities themselves need to look at the local needs and start there, start locally.
All right, let's talk more about some policy. The American Psychological Association recently issued an apology to communities of color for the association and the psychology's role in contributing to systematic racism. How do we address inequity in mental health going forward from that apology? Ms. Eckford.
I can't respond to that. You have to talk to Dr. Griffin.
I think you can, Ms. Eckford, but I will respect you passing the mic to me. I'm glad you raised that question. This apology was issued 130 years after the founding of APA. And shortly, I want to read a statement that was released shortly after that apology came out by the Association of Black Psychologists, founded only 53 years ago. And this was their statement. The APA has played a large hand in the oppression of the Black community in education, health, housing, the media, the work sector, criminal justice, and practically all domains of life necessary to thrive in and optimal well-being. APA historically has been complicit, and there are some issues that APA still needs to address. And what was not included in that apology was the fact that APA was a promoter of racial hierarchy, comparative research studies trying to show the inferiority of Black people. IQ test scores are used for that reason. I mentioned earlier that Dr. Robert L. Williams was a victim of that, and he went on to challenge IQ testing and the misuse of IQ testing. All of these were initiatives led by APA. So the powers that be still have a lot of work to do. But I wanted to share the other side of the coin following the apology.
Thank you. Professor Terrell.
That was a mic drop moment, so we can move on to the next question. Thank you.
All right, let's still talk about the inequity of mental health in our schools. As you talked about earlier, Dr. Griffin, there's a legacy of systematic inequity in all forms, but definitely mental health. What about our schools? Ms. Eckford, any feedback?
Well, I'm thinking that there's an emphasis on punishment rather than diagnosis sometimes that leads to people who need attention and treatment sometimes are misunderstood and treated unfairly.
I agree, Ms. Eckford. We see signs of our schools being turned into almost juvenile detention centers, especially with how Black, Indigenous people of color are being treated in the school system. Oh, can you hear me? Can you not hear me? Am I projecting? All right, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Eckford thought I wasn't projecting clearly. And it's painful to see what is happening in our schools at such an early age with kindergartners being punished for emotional, mental issues that they're having. Efforts are underway to address this, but more needs to be done to address the pain that a lot of children are bringing into these school systems from home. And this is a very serious problem. The course of their lives is charted many times from decisions that are made at kindergarten, and it's very difficult to change that trajectory. This is something that our association is planning to address later in the year, so be on the lookout for an event that we're working on later addressing this issue with our members who are involved with families and children.
Professor Terrell?
Thank you. Yes, so many times the issues labeled as behavior issues, especially early on, are cries for help. And when they're met by an authority figure who treats them in a punitive fashion, then it's reinforced for us to keep things to ourselves, retreat into our own worlds, and perhaps not interact or try to seek the help that we might need. And so the tracking of students from kindergarten moving forward, whether it's a curricular plan or whether it's as a behavioral issue, these things can condition us for the rest of our lives in our attitude about when or whether we seek help. Are we trustful of people who are supposedly experts in the field? And I will say that the underfunding of education, we cannot simply put it on the kindergarten teacher or the current staff that is provided in schools, because we are training teachers to death to be dietitians and disciplinarians and know their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. And we instructors of all age groups need help too. So we have to be aware of that also, that the teachers in those classrooms are not psychologists, and we can't expect them to be.
Okay, following that same theme, we have a school-to-prison pipeline problem. And so when we look at law enforcement being trained in mental health, what can we do to address mental health services provided with law enforcement, as well as when students are punished for behavior in schools?
Well, think of the difference in outcome. If a police officer takes a person to the hospital to be evaluated and diagnosed, or takes that person to be locked up, depends upon a person, the officer recognizing that there may be a mental health problem. They are called upon to respond to a lot of things, and they're not really trained to deal with mental disorders. But sometimes something is so obvious that this is not ordinary criminal behavior, and so the response is to seek to have that person evaluated. But I do know from working in an environment among police officers that there is a reluctance to call upon mental health professionals. There's a reluctance among some police agencies. Therefore, you see a SWAT team, but you don't see a psychologist or a psychiatrist trying to de-escalate the situation.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin?
Of course, this is a critical, we're at a crisis in this country in terms of what is happening with the criminalization of mental health issues. Individuals are being incarcerated because of mental health issues that were never treated. And this is why it's so important for mental health professionals to be a part of the police system. And this is an initiative that our organization, the Black Social Workers, have been addressing. There is a need for mental health trained professionals to work with our police officers to circumvent this prison pipeline that we see happening, because police officers are not trained mental health professionals. And there is a need for trained mental health professionals to be involved with these calls, to be on site. And there are some states where this is taking place. There are models for this.
Thank you, Professor Terrell.
Yes, I think it's very important to learn from those models that are working in other places, but also another interpretation of this question, not only from the police to the potential or alleged criminal activity, but within the police force itself. We can go back to the stigmatization of having something wrong, and we can think about how much perhaps mental support and perhaps therapy or some sort of mentorship amongst police officers themselves, because of course they experience such stressful situations, and if the ability to speak openly about the stresses and our coping mechanisms among the police force itself became part of the culture, then it would be far less of a leap to consider that at least as a possibility among any and all alleged perpetrators of crimes that they interact with.
Thank you. Audience, we need to hear from you. We need to engage you. There is a microphone down here. Michelle's going to it. So please, audience, come ask a question about mental health inequity.
So you hear a lot about all of these big problems, which are very real, but it can feel very overwhelming as an individual, whatever. We're faced with these big systemic issues. And I was wondering what resources are available for people like me, college students who are kind of at their young age. What resources are available to allow us to help other people and fight against these issues which are just rooted in culture?
Ms. Eckford?
Well, first I would start a conversation about your concerns, and try to find other people who have similar concerns, and then you can search to see what can be done, but at least open the conversation.
Thank you for that question, and I am very encouraged by your generation in terms of the initiatives that you have underway for addressing some of the ills of our society. You're very creative. You use social media. It's just amazing what's going on with your generation to address some of these inequities in our society. Sometimes it can start with a discussion with a class group or an organization to take on an initiative. We cannot take on everything, but if you have a passion for something in particular, that can be an inroad for you to bring others on board to do something to make a difference, because the opportunities are there. But I am very encouraged. I appreciate that question. I'm very encouraged by your generation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Terrell.
Yes, I'll just address it briefly. I think that your college experience puts you in the room with like-minded people who want to engage in that conversation with you. And it's, a boots on the ground effort to make systemic changes over time anyway. So get those like-minded people in the habit and change the culture about discussing needs that you individually or people of your same social group might have, and take advantage of the people in the room.
Thank you all. Next audience member.
First, let me say it's an honor to even be around you, so I really appreciate.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I get a little nervous. First, I just want to say I appreciate you guys coming out, so it's an honor. So thank you for that. But also, I have 3 questions. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. So my first question is, if you can go back to the age of 18 and take the knowledge that you have gained throughout the years, what is something like a project or something of the sort to improve society today? What would you say or do to start to improve mental health? What would you do differently? You understand my question?
I think so.
Yeah, but I'm 81, so I have to go back a whole lot of years. For me personally, I wish that I had agency, wish I had my own voice then that I have now. And that I understood that I should speak up and have my own say, not depend upon others to speak for me. That's what immediately comes to mind for me. Remember, I have to go back a whole lot of years.
Well, you look good, so. Anybody else want to answer that question? Like, what, if you can go back to your age of 18 and start to promote a healthy mental health lifestyle, like what would you do? Like projects or, because for me, I'm getting into psychology. Like that's my desire. Like I'm going to get there, So I just wanted like ideas of how can I help people who are dealing with mental illness. Like, what would you want to see more of?
I think back on my developmental stages, and I think these kinds of forums could have been helpful in our communities to have open discussion about the struggles that families are having, to break that code of secrecy.
Okay.
And there were opportunities. I've been in the church all of my life, and churches are doing this now. And I think we could have gotten an earlier start on this in the church by bringing these discussions publicly to the church community.
I see. Okay, so my second question, and I think it kind of got answered about I think it was the APA, but why do you feel people of my color aren't in the field of psychology? Why do you feel that way?
You wanna?
Is it because you think that it's a deliberate intent, or do you feel like it's just such a mental illness out here that they feel like, oh, I can't talk about this, or like, why do you feel people of my color aren't getting into psychology?
I think there are multiple reasons. I'm encouraged, though, by more students of color going into psychology. APA is making some changes. They're working toward diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a member of APA. I work both sides of the aisle.
Okay.
APA and ABPSI and Arkansas Association of Black Psychologists, and the expense of it is very expensive, getting a PhD. And that's why we have this scholarship fund set up, and I'm so pleased to announce that our first recipient is a graduate student at UCA. We need to have the community invested in young people and provide an opportunities for them to financially afford this pathway. And that's for any, that could be for any profession, not just psychology. Mentorship is very important. That's something our association is working on. It's important for students to know what's involved in pursuing a career in psychology. And sometimes students of color are not well advised. We've seen that. We don't limit our mentorship to just the colleges in Central Arkansas. We mentor all over the state because we want them to know what you're getting into and what you need to do in order to prepare for graduate school.
I see.
Okay.
My third question.
Okay.
Have you ever dealt with a moment to where someone made fun of you for having a mental illness, or did you see somebody else getting picked on for having a mental illness, and how did you respond to that?
I struggled for many years in attempting to talk about my high school experiences, and among the 9, there's one who refuses to talk about it at all. But the majority didn't talk about what it was like inside school for 30 years, because that is a walk through pain when you first start to do that. And I didn't start to do it until 40 years later. And it was because I was living in Little Rock and I was hearing people revising our history, and I just couldn't bear that. Yeah. And so I struggled for many years in talking to students, and I would break down. And I remember I was at a college, and a man asked me, "Why are you crying now? That was so many years ago." And the only thing I could think to tell him was that, how long do you think that it takes to overcome torture? But I didn't know, but what I was doing in those turbulent talks was that I was doing my own exposure therapy, because I had been in therapy for many years off and on for treatment of depression and anxiety, but I never mentioned the thing that troubled me so much until 40 years later. But that journey has helped me. That exposure therapy has been helpful. I'm a little bit healthier now.
We recommend therapy.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Next, you have a. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. My mother is a teacher at a school in a low-income community, and I've seen how school is still segregated. Like, it may not be by law, but it is definitely through economic disparity. Like, my mom had a training once at a school not far from her own in a far, richer neighborhood, and it's amazing how different they were. The neighborhood had its, that school in that neighborhood had its own kiln for pottery in an elementary school, while hers, teachers are paying out of their own pocket to pay for the basic stuff they need in their own classrooms. And so when the schools like that, which are primarily people of color due to systematic racism, they don't have a lot of resources for mental health. If they don't have resources to fill their classroom with the basic necessities. And so what happens with a lot of these kids, you see a lot of children with signs of autism and ADHD who are excused with behavioral issues because there's no resources at those schools for kids like that to recognize it. My mom is luckily trained in recognizing autism because she does have a medical background. But even she struggled to find it in myself, and I'm her daughter. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 16. And until then, I felt so alienated and different from everyone else. My diagnosis really gave a name to something, to that thing I was feeling my entire life, and I thought there was something wrong with me. And the fact that there's so many kids who are scared, who won't ever get that. They'll never have a name to put to why they're different. They'll just think that there's something wrong with them their entire life. It breaks my heart. And the people in charge, they don't seem to care. They just keep decreasing the school funding, and it's only increasing that disparity. What do you think we can do?
The opportunities that you have at your stage, around the 18 or so year age group, they asked us to consider what we would do. Develop mentors of your own from a variety of voices, even those that you think might not have anything to contribute to your particular life experience. We might have some nuggets of wisdom that can help you be one of the infantry that changes things for the future.
Thank you.
I would just like to share a quotation that Ms. Eckford and I heard this past September during the 65th commemoration by Ms. Minnie Jean. We were talking about social justice issues, and it seems like we are repeating history with all of the disparities that we see currently. And she reminded us that social justice work is a life sentence. It's a life sentence. So you're the generation to continue the work of social justice. Thank you for your commitment.
Good morning. I'll try to speak slowly since I have an accent, but I want to thank you guys for being here this morning. Mental health is very near to my heart. I have family members that are diagnosed with mental health, and you guys were mentioning about speaking to people and being there for them. But after they are 18 years old, they have the freedom, I would say, to choose if they want to go to a hospital or a mental health facility unit. And if the person is medicated and they miss medication or something like that happened to them, they can be out of their mind and they are not going to give consent to go to a mental health. So there are a lot of policies that hold people from taking the procedures, the doctors that they have to see, because they don't give their consent to go to a hospital or mental health unit. So what do you guys think there are possibilities or things that we as family members can help a person that is diagnosed, that can go through a mental break, to have consent to go to a mental health, or even when they get to the hospital, they have to ask who is the person that they are okay with giving their information about their medical situation, and they have to give a phone number. The person that is in a mental health break, they're not going to remember my phone number, for God's sake. So what are things that we can change the policy and support family members? They are already diagnosed, so they're already on the other side of the spectrum, and they're not getting the treatment otherwise if they don't say so.
Dr. Griffin, can you speak on that?
I knew the answer because we deal with this and working with families and individuals. It is, you want to protect the rights of the patients, and they are entitled to have their rights protected. And by the same token, it's important for them to avail themselves of the treatment that's needed. And unless a person is homicidal, suicidal, or gravely disabled, those are the three criteria where they can be committed involuntarily. They have an option as to whether or not to be responsible about their own mental health. It's a problem. It is a problem.
So is there any policies or something that we can talk about changing that, or going like to a judge and saying that when this person is out of their mind, this person is in charge of their mental health choices for going to a hospital? while they're in the right mind.
Right. Now, of course, individuals who are not, you're talking about involuntary commitment. A person can be
Exactly.
involuntarily committed. And then a person also can have, if a person is not able to take care of themselves mentally or otherwise, they can have a person who has power of attorney. And that's a route that they can take, the family can take. They need to talk with an attorney to make sure that they get power of attorney to be able to administer the affairs of that individual when they're not unable or incapable of taking care of themselves. So yes, there are legal channels in place for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Policies exist at the federal level mostly. I mean, certainly implemented at the state level. So the conversations to change federal policy would involve becoming active with political voice and maybe using the political representation that you have locally to bring this issue to the forefront so that the conversations can begin again at the federal level.
Even in Arkansas, when the person, like my family member, had a mental breakdown, he had to stay at the ER for like 2 days until they find a bed for him to go to a mental health facility. So you can definitely see that they don't have the structure, even in Arkansas level, to support these people that are diagnosed, that are on medication. They're already been through all these other steps before that in the first place. So even people that already had the choice and the opportunity to be diagnosed sometimes don't have all the structure there to help them, don't have the facility, don't have the people to be there for them. And I think COVID really did a big impact on mental health and even increase those problems that people have. But thank you for your help.
Crisis in the mental health system.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thank you.
Hi there. First of all, thank you so much. It's a privilege to hear all of you talk. You've moved me to tears multiple times in this hour. My question is, what kind of policies would you maybe start with on a local level to move the ground up? We've discussed having agencies and having conversations, but what kind of policies would you maybe instill that kind of follow the models that have been working?
Professor Terrell.
The only policy that I think someone at the state level could make is that each community, the policy could be that each community develop a policy that works for itself. And we've spoken a couple times, all of us, about not only agencies, perhaps sponsored by state or local communities, but also as an individual human agency. So that you are empowered yourself and confident that your voice can make a difference over time and take that action. So those two types of agency are important here, but I think that there's not just one glove that fits each community, and that's why that local conversation has to be, and the policy making really has to start at the grassroots.
And I'm so pleased to hear about those of you in the audience who are concerned about mental health advocacy. And I would encourage you to get involved with NAMI. It's a local organization, but it's part of a national network. NAMI, Google it. There's a local office, and this is where you can get involved in small group opportunities, work on policy issues, find out about what is happening in the state of Arkansas. With individuals who are involved in these social justice initiatives in the field of mental health in Arkansas. So I would highly recommend involvement with NAMI, N-A-M-I.
National Alliance for Mental Illness.
Yes.
Thank you again so much.
All right, is that it for the audience?
Two more.
One more? Okay. Two more.
Sorry. Hello. So I had a few questions, but I think I might just kind of merge them together because they are sort of multifaceted. So my first question was that how should we go about the high school to prison pipeline? Because I was just a senior just last spring, and just seeing like the sophomores and freshmen that came in, I could like see that there was a very big difference and disconnect to students who didn't have that social interaction throughout the school to sort of regulate said behavior in schools, which in turn results in more police authority in the schools, which could cause more, can't really find the word, but I feel like we're almost on the same page. 'Cause, I don't want to say like more of an uproar. It's like more tension during the schools, seeing the mistrust in the communities of police. Like seeing like you on social media, like almost every week, you will see a video circulating of excessive police force. And then if you go every day and see that in your school, like, okay, well, I'll never know what it'll be. And I feel like it can be more stress on students not having the proper network to find help in schools. Because just maybe last class in my psychology class, we were talking about how students, they only have student counselors to help them with their schedules. They don't have like student psychologists to help them express their feelings of what they see at home or like the pressures they just feel in school. Like I know like with some kids that were coming up, there's like, oh, it's all about clout, this, that, and the third, and they don't know how to self-regulate, know when to step down, or didn't have that figure in their life to guide them since they were sitting behind a screen for like the prime of their adolescence. So that was a question for me, and within that, how do we stop the pipeline when a whole bunch of these kids are resorting to drugs for like the psychological relief maybe? So like say like they like hit up a friend for like a vape or weed, and I don't know what weed is like. Anyway, I'll stay off that one. But just going to cheaper methods for relief, but those cheaper methods are seen punishable by our government. So it'll be like, okay, well, I can't, like, not even just in adolescence, just like for people in general. They're like, oh, well, I can't do this anymore. Let me go try crack. Oh no, crack's illegal. I get sent to jail. So, and it's like, it's in a cycle. It's like, well, I need the drug relieves me. I get caught with the drug. Now I'm in prison with two problems. Now I have an addiction and a mental health issue that wasn't solved in the first place. So I'm like, how should we go about fixing this issue that we have?
There were about 7 or 8 doctoral dissertation topics in that question. I'm so proud of you and that you are our student here. But I honestly think I brought one of my favorite books that addresses some of these questions, not all, but some of the questions that you wrapped into one there. And after the forum is over, I would love to share the author and the title, because maybe in all your free time you can read this and get some other resources and some conversations started. But wow, I wanna know you in 20 years and in between.
Yeah, and as we get ready to wrap up, let's also emphasize again mentoring and volunteers in the schools helps a lot. It helps the resource officers because we don't want to just criminalize behavior all the time in the schools. If there's other alternatives, I think there's a peer court. I believe it's a court where you are judged by your peers in the that some school districts use. So I think we can look at all type of restorative efforts in dealing with behavior for students in the schools. One last one, okay.
Yeah, I have a few questions that are kind of suggestions, but it goes back to what you said earlier, Ms. Eckford. You said you work with law enforcement and they are a little reluctant to call on mental health professionals, and that's confusing to me.
There have been policy decisions
where they, I'm sorry, there have been policy decisions where they definitely will not engage with mental health professionals in crisis situations.
Okay.
For example, a certain percentage of those occasions when SWAT is called out end in fatalities. But I can remember only once in Jacksonville where there was a SWAT team called out and a mental health professional, and there was no fatality there.
Okay. Okay.
So look at your local police agency and try to figure out how often these occasions end in fatalities and occasions when they don't, and what is the difference?
Okay. So how would we, let's say we are seeing everything that's happening and we feel that we have an answer to a lot of the problems. How would we go about being that change when we are, just still in school? So to Ms. Taylor, you said that generally cops are in high-risk environments that will incite, it'll incite adrenaline. So they're met with situations that your typical person isn't met with. Why are they not being trained? Are they not being, they should be educated on certain things? Why do we not have clinical psychologists who are willing to go out in the field? I feel like that should be a thing. There are a lot of clinical psychologists who would be willing to stand beside law enforcement. I know a lot of them. I would love to be one.
There are some models for that around the country, and the policies at the local or the state trooper or local police forces have those models occasionally around the country. And so back to Ms. Eckfort's comments about it's the policies of the local police forces, and that goes to the politics of your area and being involved in that social change that you want to see.
Okay, and how would we, last question, I feel that underprivileged communities, and everyone from underprivileged communities, black, white, struggle with emotional dysregulation, which is why these hostile environments are created when we are stopped by law enforcement. So, we come from an underprivileged community, we see certain things, and, adrenaline just go. As soon as you see blue lights, adrenaline goes. You don't know how to respond or react in those situations if you're not taught how to emotionally regulate. Like yesterday, for example, I was pulled over. He said that my tags were fake, which they weren't, and he had no probable cause. But if I wasn't aware of the situation I was in and didn't know how to regulate my emotions, there could have been another situation where we would have been seen. I think that we definitely need to be teaching young people from underprivileged communities how to emotionally regulate and act and behave in certain situations. But I do think mental illness is deep in underprivileged communities.
May I respond to your question?
Yes.
I think it's important for us not to victimize the victim, because we have evidence where people who were pulled over did all the right things and they ended up dead. So it's important for systemic changes to, there needs to be a transformation of law enforcement in order not to respond to individuals, and not just people of color, but individuals with the way they do. So I think it's important for us not to victimize the victim, because you can do all the right things and end up dead because of what is happening with some law enforcement officers. So there is a need for transformation with these stops and how they respond to citizens.
I agree. I think that's it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Panel, I'd just like to thank you, our esteemed panel, for being here. I'd like to thank the college community and the community as a whole for being part of our MLK celebration and panel discussion. Again, we thank all of our guests and
Yeah.
we will continue to have the conversation on addressing inequities, mental health, and others in our community.
Well, we're wrapping up here. First off, I'd like to just make a few observations. The first is our students are incredibly insightful and compassionate. Thank you. You give me great hope for the future, and you've reminded me why I love education. Second, Ms. Kate, thank you for sharing this spectrum of culture, gender, geography, mental health, all of that, and trying to show some kind of way to process it all. That was fantastic. And Dr. Griffin, your statistics on the disparity in professionals in your field based on race, ethnicity, were shocking. And we're going to do something about that at this institution. And also, in all seriousness, thank you for ignoring the advice that you should go to a VOTEC. You are making an impact, and that wouldn't have happened if you had taken that advice, so thank you. And Ms. Efkert, we will be forever grateful for the change that you created in our society. And last is our moderator, Mayo. Mayo developed all of those questions and did that with such compassion and class. I am eternally grateful to get to work with you every day. So on that note, I believe Ms. Eckford may be with us for a few more minutes, and if you are interested in purchasing her book and having her sign it, she's going to stay around for just a few minutes in the lobby of Charts. And this is the book, and I would highly recommend you grab it, and we really appreciate you coming today. Thanks so much, and we are dismissed.